Hi, everyone. Welcome to Commissioner Wilson's virtual office
Happy
hours.
Friday!
Happy Friday. How are
Happy
you
Friday.
doing this week so
I'm
far?
doing good. It's been really busy, but good. We got through our second BCC meeting, and with little chaos or drama, which I felt like was felt like a landmark time to get two of those behind me. The first one really felt so um, like I didn't have enough time to prep. This one I felt like I knew what I was doing a little more, and I got a chance to prep, and we actually had a chance to bring in the iPad so we could try not using the big binder. Didn't quite go as planned because I couldn't get all my attachments, so I ended up having to grab some paper anyway. But I think we really understand pretty well now how to make it work for future meetings so that we can make sure that we're getting further and further away from the paper as I sit here with paper in front of me. But some of this was mailed to me, so I didn't have any choices.
Yeah, I think incrementally, as an office, you're trying to really push for like zero waste and trying really hard to make the right decisions to get away from those big, bulky binders, which is
Yes,
cool.
it's just a lot, and it's every 2 weeks. So if that was something that I understand, sometimes you're going to need, and don't get me wrong, I love a good book, like a paper book. But if we can get away from that every 2 week gigantic, you know, what is the equivalent of several phone books, then I think we have an obligation to try to do that. So yeah, we're getting there.
So tell me, for people that are just tuning in for a few minutes, maybe you can just, from a bird's eye view,
Yes.
give a little update on some things.
Okay, so a couple things that before we get too far in case you are just tuning in really quickly, that I want to make sure is out there in our community in the west side of Orange County. There is comprehensive planning going on as far as getting public input and doing planning meetings throughout the county. The area that sort of overlies District 1 in West Orange County, the meeting is in the evening of January 20th. That's next week. So we won't have a chance to do this again before that. Um, it's at 6 o'clock in the evening. It's Vision 2050. If you put in, your search bar in your Orange County Vision 2050, it should pop up all of the information. There is actually even videos of the presentations that the planning division's already done for some of the other areas of the county, so you can get an idea of what it entails. But if you are interested in the way we are growing, this is where these decisions are made. So that's January 20th at 6 o'clock in the evening. The other one, and unfortunately it's on the same evening, but I didn't plan these, was the Central Florida Expressway Authority is doing their community planning for the virtual public meeting for State Road 429 widening through areas of Winter Garden near the Turnpike. So that'll affect our area of the county also. That is also on January the 20th at 6:30 to 7:30, and that's through the Central Florida Expressway Authority. If you go on their website, you can access their the virtual community meeting, and you can give them feedback. From what I understand, both will be recorded. There will be a way for you to give public input, whether you can make it to those meetings or not, and I would encourage you to do that. If you can't make it to the Vision 2050 one for our section of the county, still go on, look at the presentation so you can understand the way that comprehensive planning is defined, the way that they actually designate different pieces of property for planning, because it is something that really has such a huge impact in our life every day. And so many of the calls we get, so many of the reasons I ran for office were about those planning decisions. So if we have any ability at all to affect the way that the next one of those plans is rolled out, we've got to get as many voices in that conversation as possible.
And we'll definitely drop more information in the chat. Also, if you have any questions about either meeting, you can feel free to email district1 at ocfl.net with any of your questions and anything that you hear. Please put your questions in the comments so that we can answer them at the end. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about, this week, the BCC meeting. You said you felt better about it. I know there were some other updates you wanted to give as well.
Yeah, so this time of the year here in the state of Florida, a lot of people think is a more dangerous season than even hurricane season. It's the legislative season. So in Tallahassee, what that means is that our legislators will be convening, and there are bills that are going to be arising and being discussed in and out of committee. And so, as the local government, we have an outstanding individual, Kelly Teague, who is the basically our legislative chief. She's the person who oversees the department and gets information to and from our legislative delegation, and the priorities that we have here in Orange County. We try to make sure that those are established, and we literally take them to Tallahassee, and things that are going on in Tallahassee and coming out of committee from our local House and Florida lawmaking sessions come back to the Board of County Commissioners so that we can then disseminate that information, incorporate that information, make sure that we are sort of working in conjunction with the lawmakers in Tallahassee, or trying to make sure that we're keeping as much of our home rule here as possible. So that is one of the biggest issues that comes out of the legislative update that we got, and it has for the past few years. And I think it's something that is really important for people here to understand. So I hope you don't mind if I jump into it a little bit. The idea of home rule it's sort of what it sounds like, that in local communities there are certain issues that are really important to those communities, and that can vary because what is important to people in Orange County may not be the same thing as what's important to people in Miami-Dade, in Duval. So what we want to make sure of as a county is that some of those decisions, or the majority of those decisions, stay within the county. And there's been a trend at the state level, and especially here in Florida, to try to take away some of those controls. So the things that they have tried to make sure that they are deciding purely at a state level without the input of local leaders or even local citizens include everything from the way that, well, when you hear the words preemption, what that means is that they've established some law that they believe they should supersede any local law. It's come up recently with some environmental issues in areas that have sensitivity to sunscreens. We have coral reefs that, if sunscreens are absorbed by them, that can be really damaging, and the state legislature preempted the local government in the Keys from doing any kind of a sunscreen ordinance to protect their coral reefs. And here in Orange County, or actually the city of Orlando, I believe it was, worked very hard on a foam ban, and this idea of them, there was a specific issue with styrofoam and with single-use plastics, which can be a very specific to an area, some of the concerns that can come up from that type of waste. And Tallahassee preempted and said, our law is going to supersede or take over that law. So more recently, if you have been following some of the safety precautions and health and safety measures that local governments have been trying to utilize to protect citizens during the pandemic, once again, the state government, and in particular our governor, issued a directive, an executive order superseding or preempting local control to even try to keep people's health safe locally, which I think is unfortunate, because I think that we know best locally sometimes those health and safety measures. And if you look at the Florida Constitution, it's very clear that local home rule is a right of communities here in Florida. If you even back up further than that, it's sort of the reason why America pushed off England in the first place, right? Because there was the idea that somebody was controlling us from across the Atlantic. The ultimate home rule was us saying, hey, King, out of here, we're doing this ourselves. So, that struggle continues as far as us knowing, what works in our communities. So our legislative priorities include really keeping a close eye on any of those preemptions and trying to establish any opportunity to say that Orange County really wants to be able to make those decisions for the residents of Orange County, and especially when it comes to things about health, safety, welfare.
But it sounds like if the right person was at the state level as our governor who had the people and nature's best intentions ahead of any other priorities, then that preemption might actually work in our favor at times.
You're exactly right. Well, not the preemption necessarily working in our favor. There are times I think preemption is actually appropriate. Preemption was sort of supposed to have been considered a floor. And when I say that, what I mean is if you think about some health laws that are put into place, either the state or the federal level. So let's take a look at lead, okay? So the federal government decides how much lead is safe in the water, which is a crazy thought because I would say none, but that's beside the point. They decide what amount. That's a floor, okay? That's going to preempt any state from going below that. You can't say that whatever they've established is that floor, you as a state, as a local government, below that. Historically, local governments and state governments can go above, and so you think of those as being sort of the ceiling, and so they can say this level is safe, and a state can say, actually, you know what, we found that we don't want to expose our residents. We have some historical concerns. We're going up a level, and that's been permissible. So you see that sometimes in pollution. You see it with some other local safety measures as a an appropriate use of preemption. The way that it's been used recently was as a ceiling, where a local government will say, we're concerned about the safety of our citizens. We think this is a good idea. We'd like to set this at this standard. And the state comes back and, under sometimes the influence of some special interest, says, you know what, actually, we think that we are going to make the decision for that local area, and they preempt in that way. So I think it's obviously important to have somebody at the state level, governor, and your representatives, that understand the needs of each community and that hear them loud and clear. And I think the problem that we're seeing right now is that we have, out of Orange County, some amazing leadership locally within our delegation in Tallahassee, but it won't go anywhere when you've got a majority that has either a different opinion, or the governor squashes any of those initiatives that some of our local leadership here have really tried to champion. So, and I think that I really love the idea of the legislative delegation getting sort of all together. They understand each other's priorities. Just to kind of highlight some of the ones that Ms. Teague went over this week with the BCC. So Orange County will continue to support legislation to address local decision making on the perception of brownfields. This was something that has come up, and they're going to continue to support that. They're going to support Amendment 1 legislation that directly impacts water quality, land preservation and acquisition. I think anybody that's followed how popular Amendment 1 was when it was voted in by the majority of Floridians, overwhelmingly,
89%.
That it should continue to be supported, and Orange County continues to keep an eye on that. Legislative priority includes community partners with efforts that the county has entered into. So if the county has entered into some kind of an agreement, that they're able to make those without being preempted at the state level. So those, once again, those preemption issues seem to come up a lot. The legislative delegation established that they're opposing any legislation that negatively impacts TDT funding. So TDT funding is the tourist tax funding that was established through legislation some years ago. And what it does is it's a tax that's levied on overnight stays. The tourists who come to stay here pay in, that is then reused to support the areas that tourism affects, that support the industry, and anything that goes into that. There have been some narrow uses of the TDT tax and the tourism economic drivers. And there have been some counties that have been able to utilize the TDT tax for more infrastructure purposes. What the legislative delegation wants to make sure of is that the state doesn't make all those decisions, and that TDT tax, that anything they decide doesn't negatively impact the TDT decisions made here at the local level. So I think that's really an important one. There was a whole list of legislation coming up that they want to monitor, including what's going on with workers' compensation. A big one for a lot of people here. What happens with our Central Florida Expressway Authority? I was just talking about the widening of the 429. I think the Central Florida Expressway Authority is a difficult body to understand for many residents because we all know about our local appointees, but it is actually part of the agency that falls under the State Department of Transportation. There are appointees from the local counties, as well as the city of Orlando, and the governor then appoints two people. So there's a lot that goes into the decision making of the CFX board, and I think there are concerns about what could happen if they collapse those type of advisory boards. Where does the decision making go from there, or if they widen their the powers of that type of agency? So that goes under the category of monitor for our legislative delegation. Public records is always a big one. So in the state of Florida, we have open records laws. We have pretty outstanding sunshine laws, which require us to operate government in the most open and transparent way possible. It's not perfect. It does a pretty good job. So I think they keep an eye every year on some of the exemptions that are whittled away at those open meeting and public record laws. The Florida retirement system is one they're keeping an eye on. Red light cameras is another one that may be coming up. So we'll continue to update all of our residents on anything that we think will affect you, because I do think that it's hard to follow those in and out of committee. I have an alarm that I set. You can actually set an alert with with the Florida legislature to let you know if something is being sent up for a vote, and we will make sure to get that all back out. The other two that are of interest are vacation rentals and legislation governing vacation rentals, and legislation governing medical marijuana, because I know that those are sort of interesting and important issues for residents of Orange County.
Awesome. Well, I know the next thing, something that we touched on a lot the last meeting was the COVID-19.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Lee. I'm just looking at this now,
Oh,
and I
no, go
realize I
ahead.
skipped right over. I get so excited talking about home rule that I skipped right over the key priorities that were identified and that will be that were determined, identified, printed, and approved by the Board of County Commissioners for the legislative agenda for 2020. Number one was protecting the Sadowski Fund, which I'm probably mispronouncing. That's the Affordable Housing Trust Fund that was set into place that has been raided again and again because we don't have a very stable tax base. And so we've really been not great at accessing or leveraging what was supposed to have been a trust fund to really help people in times like what we're having right now. So that is a key priority. Number two was preserve existing local option surtax authorization. And the third one is expanding nuisance abatement to include aggravated battery and homicide. The fourth one was smart cities renewable energy efforts, to make sure that the smart cities plan moves forward. The last one that they outlined, which is a big one in Senate appropriations, and we'll keep a really close eye on this one because I know this is really important to all of the people that follow legislation that affects water quality, is the septic to sewer and stormwater improvements through appropriations, and then of course affordable housing through appropriations, and the Vivitrol program, which is of course for opioid treatment.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the key priorities. I'm sorry, I just didn't want to get out of here and think, oh, I should have mentioned those were really important, not just the home rule. The reason I think the home rule always comes up for me first is because without the home rule, so many of the things that we can tackle here, we have our hands tied. So anyway, that's why I hit that first. Got the key priorities. Now, if you have any questions about any of those, please reach out. I don't have all the answers, but I definitely know some places to look, and we will keep an eye on anything moving through those legislative bodies and make sure to update as as things progress through the session.
Awesome. Well, thank you for breaking that down. We talked a lot about COVID-19 the last meeting, and I know that we've had some more updates. Maybe you wanted to share a little bit about what you learned this week?
Yeah, so that's a good news, bad news story, and I wish it. Every day I wish that we would get up and the numbers of people who are still being diagnosed and hospitalized would, fall out the bottom, and we're like, wow, today was the day. It's not happening right now. I think we're seeing some of that, what was talked about, the post-holiday surge still. So we are still seeing high numbers of COVID positive cases. That's the bad news. The bad news is that it's still out there. People still have to be really careful. Make sure that you're still keeping, some of those distances. I think while the vaccines are rolling out, there have been a lot of questions coming in about if someone is vaccinated, do they still need to socially distance? Do they still need to, wear their mask? Yes, because for starters, it's only 95% effective. And as anyone who's been vaccinated for anything knows that without the booster, first of all, I don't even know if we get to the 95. The booster hasn't come for many of the people that have had their first shot yet. And with that 5%, there's still a risk. Additionally, there's just not as much data about how long people who are positive can be spreaders. So until we have all that, until we get enough vaccinated people that we really get that true safe herd immunity, then please try to take those precautions. We have COVID testing ongoing still through the Barnett Park site. If you go on the Orange County website, you can make an appointment. Even on MLK Day, there's going to be testing going on 9 to 5. As of today, this is a good news on the good news side. As of today, 3.1%. Actually, this was as of yesterday. That 3.1% of Orange County's population has been vaccinated, which is 54,461 Orange County residents. So they've reached capacity as of right now. The way that Orange County is utilizing the third-party application for appointments is that they are opening them for a period of time, filling the spots that they know that they logistically can safely and smoothly get done, close the portal, then they reopen once they are able to get those batched out. And so that's why when you hear about people in Orange County not having to sleep in parking lots, that's why. I know it's been really frustrating to navigate the online portal for a lot of people, and they are working on it. There are fixes being worked on. I understand out of the board meeting this week that there is some language, some translations being added. There are through Orange County's 311 informational call center now, they can help walk people through the process. And so I think all those things are hopefully going to start helping, smooth out some of those transitions. I know this is difficult. The county, I think, has done as good as it can do with the information and abilities that it has and the amount of vaccine it's given. Unfortunately, the allotments come from the federal government to the state to the counties, and then the counties partner with the Department of Health, which is a state agency, in order to disseminate those. So that's why you see such a difference from county to county and from state to state. There has been no overarching policy for how those were disseminated. And so that's really been the frustration. I think in the days and weeks to come, it's going to get better and better because, for starters, and I said this, I believe, last week, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but I think it's important. Most of our healthcare workers have been vaccinated. So at the very least, know that if something were to happen, that you've got healthcare workers on the other end of this system who are safe and are able to take care of our most vulnerable populations. So that, to me, is one layer of comfort. The second one is that we are getting, I think, in incremental stages as the vaccine becomes available. paramedics and firefighters trained on how to administer the vaccine, and they are looking at and have maybe even started in some areas, but I know that they're really just working on what they've got right now, being able to give the vaccine in communities that are either immobile or have people who have limited mobility and or limited capability to be able to get on the internet to get those appointments. So reach out to us with if you know of a community that you are concerned about being isolated from the availability to drive out to a site, or you know they have limited internet access, or they are just, it's a senior group who isn't comfortable using internet. And we can certainly try to make sure that we pass that along to emergency services and to our amazing Orange County Fire and Rescue. Like I said, it's going to take patience. It's going to be slow going. That's a process. There's only so many, there's only so many firefighters and paramedics, but
Yeah, we even had somebody call and say that she was concerned because there was an elderly home that didn't have access to transportation really well, didn't have access to internet, but also there was word of them thinking that they're just going to wait till it gets to Walgreens. Or they don't want to deal with the lines. They don't want to deal with the
yeah.
hassle. They're just going to wait. And there's a lot of misconception that's going on online, circulating through the media. And so just please reach out if you
Yeah.
have a community that you know that's similar.
And that reminds me, Lee, I'm so glad you mentioned misconceptions, because the other thing that we want to warn citizens of is scams, because unfortunately you know, with anything like this, there are oftentimes people who will try to prey on people who are scared. And so if you have, a text that comes through, or someone tries to send you an email or a phone call where they are charging for a vaccine, that's not a legitimate vaccine. All the vaccines are being given free of charge, and should you have any questions about it, or you believe there's anything fraudulent, please reach out to us or call law enforcement, because we need to make sure, even if you don't fall for it, if you see it, make sure that we know about it, because we've got to protect the people out there who are scared and vulnerable and do want to find an easy way to be vaccinated. Ideally, within the coming months, it will be at Walgreens or CVS or some of the other retail outlets close and convenient. Until then, the county is largely supervising the county's portion of it through with the Department of Health, and private healthcare providers are independently disseminating their portions of it. So Advent Health, Orlando Regional Health Systems have also established their own appointment systems and their own protocols. So if you have questions about theirs, I would go check their websites. They've all been really good about updating whether or not they can help with appointments or help elderly people with appointments. And if you have any questions that we haven't talked about, give us a call or email us, and we'll try to walk through it ourselves. Sometimes I have to get on those third-party appointment sites myself just to see how they look and work, and then it's easier for us to help somebody else navigate it, because I may not be the age yet that I've given up on the internet totally, but I certainly get frustrated sometimes with those apps. And
Yeah, and so if you were to email district1@ocfl.net with a community in mind that probably doesn't have access to transportation or internet, what we would do is tip off, the fire department, let them know a list of these communities that you guys let us know about, and then they will actually go door to door and leave a form on the door for people to bring to their front office and work with the management of the, mobile home or HOA or wherever, and come with all of their setup on that particular day that's on the form, so that people can just come in small quantities.
yeah, and I think the other thing that they reminded us of that I would like to pass along is that if you've helped someone with an appointment, or you've gotten an appointment and you can't make it, to please cancel that appointment, because that is a spot that somebody else can get, and that can be life-saving. And you think about every day that goes by, and there's been a number of those. people have been really good about making their appointments, from what I understand. But even a very small percentage, when you're looking at the thousands of people that they're trying to get through, can make a difference. The other one is that I wanted to share the Veterans Association, the Orlando VA. If you're a veteran, they also are offering appointments. So we have that was also on the Orange County website, a link to the Veterans Association for their appointment schedule.
Alrighty, so before we start getting into questions, let's just talk a little bit about some of the people that you got to meet this week. One of the meetings that you had was with the police department.
Yes, this was very interesting. This was the Orange County Sheriff's Department. John Mina was reelected Orange County Sheriff this year, and I had never had the opportunity to meet him face to face. Well, I say face to face. We all had masks on, but sort of face to face in the same room, and it was a very interesting educational experience for us at the facility in Valencia, where they actually send sheriffs recruits to learn how to go out into our community. The issues that we discussed and were brought up, and they're so complicated, and this could be its very own whole Facebook Live or webinar someday. But it was about de-escalation. I think when we think about de-escalation, it's another one of those words that is kind of it's a little bit vague. You're like, is that like the hostage negotiator? What is that? But if you think about what happens in the midst of an interaction between law enforcement and a citizen, and how things can go in any number of decisions that are made in the nanoseconds between the time that a phone call is made to the time that that sheriff's deputy arrives to the time that the entire scene is over, there are so many bazillion choices and decisions that everyone makes that affect the outcome. And so what this particular opportunity was for the commissioners was to really go over the way that they train sheriff's deputies and how that has changed over the last year, how that's changed over the last several years, but very particularly how that's changed over the last year. And I mean, not to get into sort of, trying to do a press release for the sheriff's department, because that's not my field, that's not my department. But I would encourage you to do a little research on it if it's something that you're curious about, because Orange County Sheriff their office has even responded to very valid criticisms about being transparent in body camera recordings and release times of those, and how that transparency and communication with the public is really the key to making sure that we can trust our law enforcement professionals. And as a Orange County Commissioner, somebody who I feel like my job is to protect and look over the residents in my community, it did bring me a sense of comfort to go in and see the rigorous training and the additional training and the research that's going into how to improve that training. So I think that, without getting into my bigger criticisms of our systemic issues and our historic issues, which I think we can't minimize those, I do want to express my gratitude for the Sheriff's Department in allowing us a glimpse into the way that they're really trying to get what they called muscle memory in the heads of trainees and recruits for how to engage citizens in every single situation and every call in a thoughtful manner. One of the things that has recently been updated is that there are mental health professionals now that do come into play when there's a call that is specifically a mental health call through our 911 that may have originally been a call to law enforcement, or there may be a component to it that includes law enforcement, that they are also engaging mental health professionals. I wanted to know, because I feel like our first responders deal with trauma every day, which then they absorb that trauma, and part of the solution is also making sure that they have access to mental health and good health care, and that they are taken care of, because you can't be expected to be the rescuer if you're drowning in your own grief and trauma. So So I was able to find out that they do have access and that there is, an availability to law enforcement with that are, that have either encountered trauma or are having ongoing grief issues in their own worlds. We got to do a simulator. This was really scary for me. I don't even play video games. So when I describe the simulator, I don't want you to think it's a video game because it wasn't. It actually looked like real people, and it's used in training for people who are going into law enforcement, and so that they understand their own reactions, their own biases, their own reaction time, their accuracy, and how those scenes play out and the timing that they play out. And it was an extraordinary experience for me, and my adrenaline was, I was really shaky about it afterwards, and I thought I couldn't do this every day. So my heart goes out to the men and women that with every bit of dedication to their community that go out and put their lives on the line. It was a very thought-provoking exercise, and I hope that at some point, and I even said this then, it would be nice for everyone to have the opportunity to participate in an exercise like that, where they are literally in the shoes, in the eyes of someone responding to a potential call that a law enforcement officer or a first responder would have to arrive to. And the one that I participated in was actually in conjunction with a school resource officer at a school where there was a potential school shooting. So needless to say, the emotions were very high, just even getting my brief description of a scene in a simulator. Mm-hmm. So it was, it was a very, I will probably be having, lots of thoughts about it for the days and weeks to come. Mm-hmm. But I'm grateful to the Sheriff's Department for inviting us all in to do that.
Mm-hmm. I just find it so fascinating because you've been very vocal about your stance on certain social justice issues, and you're very passionate. You truly believe that Black Lives Matter. You're right there,
yes.
But I feel like a lot of my friends that are also very into this advocacy and they want to see change like immediately. If they had a chance to do the simulator, I think it would engage in a more in-depth conversation and vice versa. You know what I mean?
Well, and I do think that you can. I think the issue. I think you have to look at systems that we've put into place over the history of our country that have flaws or have been reframed to somehow, unfortunately, put both our citizens and our good law enforcement officers in sometimes a compromising position. And I think that this exercise absolutely opens your eyes, or opened my eyes, or would open anyone's eyes to how difficult the split second decisions are. I can't even begin to imagine, the commitment it takes and to go out and make those decisions. It does not take away anything from the suffering that's been inflicted on a population in our society at the hands of law enforcement who were ill-trained, who were biased, who weren't in it because they loved their community. They were in it because they wanted control or power, or because they were trying to help establish or keep power. So those are very different things, and I know this is more complex than what we can get into here and today, but I think that hearing the educational component for our sheriffs, cadets, and recruits and people who are going into that is really important. I think understanding on our side, a responsibility on our side as citizens, when we talk about how we are going to fund or structure any of these things, is understanding where we might see results. And I think hearing that there's going to be additional mental health intervention for calls that come in about mental health issues, that should bring us a sense of being heard. I think there are incremental changes. I think there are a lot of changes that will be coming, and we'll stay plugged into this. I mean, I know this isn't the last time we talk about it, and it may come up. I think it could come up as a legislative issue state and federally. So we'll keep rounding back and talking about it. I didn't know my reaction was going to be my reaction. Well, I may have known a little bit, but I did think that um, I think it was very thought provoking, and I think I would encourage anybody who has the ability to really look into that. You know, look into the way that they train and to see what they think about it. I mean, I would love to. Maybe we could do one of these sometime about that issue.
Awesome. Well, you talked about systemic issues. Day one, you came in swinging with social justice, equality, protections for our wildlife. And one that I think is really prevalent right now is homelessness.
Yeah.
And so we had a really great conversation with a pastor from an organization called Matthew's Hope.
Yes, and these are all tied together. You're exactly right, because of when you see that we have not done a great job taking care of some of the mental health issues in our society, or addictions issues, then a lot of times people have, as a result, lost jobs, lost the place where they lived, lost family connections, and then where are they? And oftentimes they are wherever they can be, which that means behind a building or in the woods, or and thank goodness there are people out there in the world that still value every single one of the people in our world, and that devote their lives to things like trying to make sure those people have clean socks and not just a hot meal, potential training for a new job. And I said clean socks because it was actually one of the things that we talked about today. It was one of the first times I had an interaction as a citizen with Matthew's Hope. Was we did a sock drive, and then my Girl Scout troop actually helped set up some things for the preschool as their Silver Award project. It was a sad conversation, but a good conversation. We have in District 1 in West Orange County, I know for those of you who have been in West Orange for some time, there are just not a lot of services out there as far as our social safety nets and our ability to really, even just on a freezing night, make sure that the people aren't dying. So we rely so heavily on the good work of Matthew's Hope and some of the community partners that they work with, and that we can work with as county government to try to make sure that people's needs are taken care of. I think the interesting part that Pastor Blue talked about was that if anybody can hand out a meal, but really trying to find a path out of that constant state of desperation is what their goal is. And so what does that look like as far as making sure that that they have life skill training, making sure that there are opportunities for young parents who are homeless to have their children cared for a few hours for a job interview. I mean, some of these things are just really common sense, basic things that we need to do to take care of people so that they can pull themselves out of a desperate situation.
Yeah, so part of the reason why we contacted Matthew's Hope was because there's some homelessness. There's some homeless camps in District 1, some of which basically get some violations called on them, and then when you have enough complaints coming in, the county or city of whichever area in District 1, they're forced to vacate these camps that are the only source of survival for some of these people. And there's no transitional programs to help them go somewhere.
Yeah, we have a huge gap, in speaking to the pastor about that gap and where we need to really start to explore some other. Matthew's Hope does a great job. They can't do it all, and so that includes transportation issues, because when we decrease the trips that our publicly funded transportation provides, then sometimes jobs are lost, then housing is lost. So you end up with this a very rapid spiral. And I think, it's tragic when you think about what's happening with the homeless camp that we were made aware of recently that was cleared, but that is somebody's property, and unfortunately, the way that property rights are set up, the oftentimes people who are just looking for a place to sleep and somewhere safe to put their heads down, they're trespassing, and they're trespassing on someone's property, and there are kind, generous people in the world that when they know about that sort of look the other way sometimes because it's either an investment property or it's something that just isn't being developed, but oftentimes that can end up also being a health risk for those people. And so there's a responsibility. I think we all have a responsibility, first of all, to make sure that we're keeping people safe. That if somebody's property is being trespassed on, that they have options that don't put them at risk as the property owner, because they are also not responsible for making sure that they're housing these people. And so where we have our ability to connect with wraparound services and mental health services is going to be, I think it's going to be a project for us to dig deeper into. I know that we talked about, once we get our bearings, what projects we really want to try to hone in on, and I think that's going to be one of them. And trying to figure out where we can help with those wraparound services, helping with I think transportation is going to be just this ongoing conversation and project and goal.
Yeah, I think one of the things I was the most fascinated about was the thought of transition versus a handout.
Yeah.
I know that sounds very controversial because you think emergency, you need to get them fed,
Right.
you need to get them clothes. But giving them daycare or preschool opportunities so that a parent
Right.
can go to work, another thing that he said that really I never thought of before, and I was homeless once, was, if you just take a homeless person and just, they, you don't think about rehabilitation, you don't think about that transition, you just put them in a home, right? Because a lot of counties and cities, they try to do home first, meaning get these people in a house.
Roof, head. Right.
You're not dealing with their mental health issues.
Right.
You're not dealing with their skill sets or maybe disabilities or what have you. You're just trying to get them somewhere. And he literally said, you're putting a homeless person in a home. They're still going to be homeless.
Right.
Even though they're inside of an enclosed space.
Because what keeps you in your home? Having, doing something that will be able to pay for that place each month, and having the stability of knowing that you aren't going to get in trouble with a landlord because you've not been, either if you're, trying to stay in recovery, or if you are, whatever the mental health issue is that may sometimes get in the way of daily life skills and being productive. And it is it was, a really important thing, I think, when we talked last week a little bit about the blind spot that we have towards the mental health component, and how it's really a big part of looking at the homelessness issue. And like you said, not just sheltering. And you're right. You got to get someone. And I think about kids a lot of times, and how if they're hungry, they can't learn. If they're tired, they can't learn. If you look at it in a long term, though, solutions, we can feed, we can make sure there's a shower, and get somebody cleaned up and clothing, and get them back out there. But if we're not providing them with the mental health to make sure that they can follow up with that, and that they are able to keep a routine and a job and those life skills that we've been hopefully helpful to get them connected to, then that cycle starts again. And so it's such a hard, it's a tough thing to get all those components in place. But I think we owe it to the people in District 1, knowing that there's an opportunity to fill in the gaps in some of those, and especially opportunities to make sure that the things that fall into local government, like transportation and potentially partnerships with the health department, or what other ways that we can make sure that some of the healthcare needs are met.
Yeah, I look at that now, that same analogy, for the whole country.
Yeah.
Like, we could go to work, we could live in a house, but I feel like if everyone, it's not homeless people versus
Right.
everyone else. It's we all have our levels of disabilities or
Right.
trauma
Right.
or addiction or
Right.
mental health issues. If you don't address it, then we are unhealthy as a nation,
Right.
and we're just trying to function
Right.
in a way that is kind of sickly. You know, we're not well if we're not prioritizing
Right.
our emotional and mental
Well,
health.
and actually, I loved also what the pastor said about the idea that, you know, people with disabilities aren't disabled at everything, that they are still very talented in many different ways,
Mm-hmm.
but finding those and finding the way that they can connect that
Mm-hmm.
to meaningful ways to participate in either, an occupational program or in some kind of a living situation are so important. And we're going to make a field trip out someday. If the pastor's
Mm-hmm.
on tonight or watches this at some point, we're going to make a field trip out so I can show off the beautiful carpentry that happens
Mm-hmm.
in their store, because it's, to me, a great example of a very tangible way to market skills that may not have been marketable or marketed for the people who are doing them before, that can lead to another
Mm-hmm.
opportunity in life.
Mm-hmm.
So as somebody who can't do carpentry at all, I'm mesmerized by the beautiful things that they do. You should just see some of the, and they you would love it even as somebody who recycles, because they can repurpose, you know, a piece of junk, some furniture, into something so beautiful and a piece of art. And so I think that's such a cool way to see, the occupation kick in, and also see this, kind of great resource for us to go shopping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you got a stimulus check and you don't necessarily need it, or are going to receive some type of aid and you feel like you don't really need it, if you can donate it, please contact us so we can get you in touch with Matthew's Hope so that you can donate to them.
Yeah.
There's not really enough shelters in District 1
Yeah.
or resources, and so I think that funding could really go towards people in need right now.
Yeah, and they always need volunteers. I know that right now we're trying to be really careful about where we go and what we're doing, and I know that they've been very, very cautious and careful. And they get up every day and go to work there trying to take care of so many people in so many different ways: the preschool, the daycare. Um, so it's, volunteer if there's financial donations. I know that they are particular about the types of clothing and shoes they take in, just because their needs are particular. There's a need for some things more than others. So I just kind of keep that in mind. I know sometimes people feel like if something they had was turned away, that it's that they were that it was offensive or something. It's not. It's because they don't want to be wasteful, and there could be another nonprofit out there that does need whatever that item is. And Matthew's Hope just isn't the right fit.
A
So
gift for children. A gift for children has a kind of similar thing, but it's they partner with Orange County Public
yes, yes,
Schools,
yes,
and they take donations and they give them to the schools
yes.
if it's
Surplus
clothes or
pencils and
surplus
yeah.
pencils. Yeah. So maybe now we can take a few questions before we wrap up, if there's any coming in.
We have one question and one comment. So the comment comes from Caroline Tremanik. She says, all Orange County commissioners should share their office hours. It helps the public to share transparency to where our tax dollars are going. Thanks for sharing information on all of the work your office is leading. And then the question comes from Laura Betts. She asks, are there any plans for Orange County to hire a diversity manager?
This is such a great question, because I bet you read the same article I read about Orlando getting a diversity coordinator. So the mayor has a team that actually sort of operates a similar way. And now I'm going to totally mess up introductions here.
Community outreach. Well, you met them for the first 5 minutes that you were in
And
office.
literally, we were walking in with boxes, so
Yeah.
it was very brief.
Mhm.
But knowing that it's something interesting, we will repost their information, because it's not the way that City of Orlando is doing it. But I know that this is a team that is trying really hard to make sure that that we're getting voices heard from all over Orange County, being as inclusive as possible. If you can think of anybody that we need to include, that's what we should be doing. So don't ever hesitate to reach out, because I do think that sometimes there are blind spots even in people who are really working hard to be inclusive. And then thank you for the kind comment about opening up office hours. I have to defer to my amazing staff,
You
Lee and
work all day,
Ann,
every day.
because um, I think that there are times that we work and work and work, and we would just get on that treadmill and keep going, and then phones, meetings, da, 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 and then we would zip out of here. That if that this wasn't scheduled, and if they didn't say, "Are you ready? Here's some information. Let's get. What do you want to talk about?" That this might get by us. And I agree with you. I think it's so important. And I remember having so many questions week in and week out about why decisions were made the way they were made. So even if even if this is not attended by many, I still think it's important, and people can always go back and reference it if they're curious about what we talked about. And I'm hopeful that as the days and weeks go on, that people who have questions that have really kind of plagued them will continue to come forward. So yeah, get the word out in your local communities about it, and we'll keep we'll keep doing this for as long as people want to hear from us. Well, actually, probably even if they don't, because I think it's important that transparency is it is a fundamental idea for me as far as the way that we're going to operate.
Yeah, and with the mayor's community liaisons from like the Latin American community, the African American community, the Asian American community, and so many others, um, we haven't had a chance yet to be briefed by the work that they've done in the community in depth. And I know that that's right on the top of the commissioner's list. You're actually your whole month is going to be going from department to department and doing tours and meeting and getting full on briefings. So that's why each week we're kind of going through important
Which
issues,
also
but
means that if you
updates.
have questions that I can take to those departments with me,
Yeah.
send them, because I don't mind. Even if I'm getting my very first tour or briefing, and if you want to know something, I can ask. Um, I'll tell you that it's interesting because some of the briefings that I have are in places that I don't know that I would have if it wasn't something that administration here really thinks is important. I'm not even sure if it would have made my radar. I'm going to be going to the medical examiner's office, which is part of Orange County government, and I am very curious, but I don't know if that would have made my radar on my own. So I will keep you posted on how that goes. I think some of them I've been to before, but I'm going with new eyes. So if you have questions about things, we'll be making it to the landfill at some point. We'll be making it to the corrections facilities at some point. So all of those aspects of government that your tax dollars go to, and hopefully I can be accountable for any questions that you have and can report back.
Well, I'll tell you, my biggest shock, and I say this every single meeting, but I mean it, is that when you organize your community, you have a lot of power. I did not realize that every single department is very influenced by every constituent concern that comes in, and they
It's
work
true.
on it right away.
It's true, and sometimes the answers aren't always what we want to hear, and I think that is the hard part for me, because I want an answer and I want it now, and I don't understand why this hasn't been looked at, and whatever my issues are, because I think I'm not the most patient person in the world, but I'm working on that. I am working on that. But I know that I am doing it sometimes because, or my impatience is sometimes because I've heard from residents that have been frustrated for a long time. And so if the answer that we get about an issue is something that wasn't to our liking, what we can do then is try to figure out what we can do. So if we find out that we're getting nowhere in one avenue, then we can try to re-examine it a different way. I think this is going to be, there's a lot of these things are going to be learning curves for us for how to try to leverage the departments we do have, the budget we do have, the access we do have to county staff and services, to try to fill in some of the places where we haven't been getting immediate answers.
Yeah, so if you come in your community, you have a lot of other neighbors that have similar issues, and you're organizing, you're getting your binder together with information and photos and maps. Like, it might feel frustrating. Like, why should I have to go out of my way to do those things? But you're the eyes and ears of the community that we, the county, we are basically working for you.
Yeah, and I'm always so blown away. I feel like we have the best we have the best constituents. I am always so blown away at the amount of detail that we're able to get, and it's really, really important, because that is the way that we know what to ask for and where to ask it, and because the homework is done by the people who are living it. And so if there's an issue that's going on in a neighborhood and someone has done all that homework and brought it to us, we value that. I know it may feel sometimes like, either you're being a pest or you're, whatever. We don't care. Bring it. Bring it. Bring it. We need it because you are the eyes and ears. We can't be everywhere. And sometimes I think, especially with local government where there are so many operational things that go on within departments, it's not even that the departments are closing their eyes to it. They don't know sometimes until it's raised. So keep dialoguing with us. We've been really, really so happy with the amount of information we've gotten. We've been able to build sort of constituent and case files that allow us to continue to work on things. Some of them will be short term, some of them will be more long term as far as our goals in being able to get things resolved. But we appreciate every ounce of information.
Yeah, and any other last comments before signing out?
Happy MLK weekend. I believe today is his actual birthday.
Yay.
And I think it is, a moment of reflection for all of us. I am so grateful for a world that Martin Luther King Jr. had been in at some point, and I wish he'd been here longer, but I'm grateful for his presence in what I feel like is my daily life. And that we all need to try to reflect at this time on some of the struggles that he began the work on that's not finished. And so we all have those responsibilities, big or small, to continue that work. And I think, a lot of us working on them gets a lot of those things done, and the awareness. So that's what this weekend I think is going to mean for us and my family. We try to make sure that we talk about in our days, like little ways every day, that we can look for ways for, to make sure that we are peacefully making it a more just world. And that's not always easy. And after the national events, the idea of passive resistance once again feels so relevant and so important. There are so many things that were done, making good trouble, right? Doing it the right way. You can be a fighter for your community without actually fighting, physically fighting, and that's the part that we have to remember.
I'm tearing up. I'm literally crying right now.
It's crazy to say, but it's so true. Right now it's just
she's real life.
It's just right now it feels very, this particular MLK weekend, it's going to make me get choked up. It feels very important and very timely. So, if you're listening and you're a parent and your children haven't seen or haven't read some of the important talks and speeches that Martin Luther King Jr. shared with the world, do it this weekend. This is the best time to do it, and then make it a tradition. Much like the way that you would do fireworks on 4th of July, going back and watching some of that footage of his speeches where he captivated a world, part of the tradition for a weekend.
Okay, we gotta go.
Sorry. I didn't mean to.
Oh, thank you so much.
I'm so sorry.
Happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day. We are excited to see you. Please email district1@ocfl.net if you have any questions, and we will see you next Friday at 4 p.m.
Thank you.
Bye.